Hello and welcome to From the Be All End, the Burnley podcast. This is a special Clarets Extra episode to run through the Clarets transfer deadline day. Quite quiet in terms of incomings, just the one. I'm Andrew Greaves, alongside me Simon Evans and Chris Borden from the usual pod squad. And we're delighted to be joined by Tom Kundert, who is the editor of Portugal website and also the World Soccer Portugal correspondent. Now, that might give you a clue as to what we're going to discuss first. It is, of course, the arrival of Florentino Luis from Benfica. €2 million loan fee, we believe, with an obligation or option, depending on what you're reading, for €24 million next summer. The midfielder joins us after enjoying a spell of over 180 games for Benfica. Tom, we'll start with you. We may as well. Tom has joined us from Lisbon. We're very grateful for him to do so. We've all kind of had a look at the highlights reels and got excited. I know Simon's been sharing it in our WhatsApp group, but just kind of break down the kind of player that Burnley are getting in Florentino.
Yeah, well, I think first thing to say is, like you just said it there, 180 appearances for Benfica, you know, and you don't play that many appearances for Benfica unless you're a very good player. So he is an excellent player. He's a little bit different, I'd say, to your average Portuguese player who ends up in England. You know, there's a lot of them at the moment, aren't there? And you kind of associate them with being kind of players with a lot of finesse, with a lot of skill, a lot of technique, perhaps not the most physical of players. And I'd say Florentino, if anything, is kind of an English style or old-fashioned English style player. You know, is really all about just getting stuck in, you know, not particularly aesthetically beautiful or elegant player, you'd say, but really effective at what he does. You know, really strong defensive midfielder, covers a lot of ground, sometimes got nicknamed, I think, early in his career, the octopus, because he just seems to, you know, get those long legs everywhere to intercept balls which you think he's got no right to intercept. And yeah, good player, you know, really good player. I think, to be perfectly honest, I think perhaps his career hasn't quite hit the heights which people thought it was going to when he first appeared on the scene. He first came into the Benfica team, actually, curiously enough, under their current coach, Bruno Lage, of course, you know from his time in England. But it was the first time he's in his second spell at Benfica, and he was there in his first spell, and he did an absolutely brilliant job there. And they recovered, I think, a 7-point gap from Porto. They overcame it to win the league, which is very unusual for that to happen in Portugal. And they did it with, say, 4 or 5 really star performers, and Florentino was certainly one of them. It was a season when João Felix, you know, really exploded. And I always remember listening to, quite often I like to listen to the radio commentary as well as the TV commentary. And I always remember one of the pundits saying, there's a lot of talk about João Felix, you know, this amazing new Portuguese player, how much money he's going to earn Benfica. And one of the pundits said, if I was a scout from a foreign team and I had to pick one Benfica player, it would be Florentino Luis. It wouldn't be João Felix. And that kind of tells you how highly rated he was at that time. I think it's fair to say he hasn't really developed his game, you know, fantastically. It's always been super consistent, you know, really good performer, really consistent, but he's your kind of 7 out of 10 player every game. You know what you're getting from him. But for instance, he's not the greatest distributor, not the greatest passer, and people were thinking perhaps, you know, he could develop that side of his game to be really a, you know, complete holding midfielder. But yeah, so I'd say he's, you know, really good. Sorry for the long rambling answer, but I'd be quite happy if I was a Burnley fan. I think you know, got a really good consistent player there. He's not going to pull up any trees. He's not going to win any Player of the Month awards in England or anything like that, but he should make the team a lot stronger, I think.
That's really interesting, Tom. Thanks for that. Yeah, I'm just wondering. I mean, Burnley, we've had a number of foreign players in the last few years. Before that, we hardly had any, and they've been a mixed bag, really. And one of the things that, you know, we've got 1 or 2 players who've come and just disappeared and not featured at all, and there's been question marks about whether they're training and so on. I mean, the reaction of Benfica fans to him going, there seems to be a lot of affection looking at the online and the pictures of the tribute to him as he went away and so on. In terms of his sort of attitude to the game and his sort of professionalism, what have your impressions been of him on that front?
Well, yeah, on that front, 100%, you're getting a really consummate professional, I would say. Really, really good attitude. I mean, some people think he's even being treated a little bit badly because, Portuguese football, especially the top clubs, a lot of, you basically have to win. If you don't win, if you're Benfica, Porto or Sporting, if you don't win the league, you've had a bad season. And that means there's a lot of turnover in the players and usually quite bloated squads. Sometimes, big money signings coming in. And Florentino was one of those players who always seemed to, or quite often he'd miss out when people think that perhaps he didn't deserve to. Why? Perhaps because he's a homegrown player. So, he didn't cost the club anything. Don't have to justify if you pay 15 or 20 million, which is a lot by Portuguese standards for a player, you really have to play them. Also, he's a player, his attitude is just absolutely first class. I've never heard anything about him, complaining about, I should be in a team or, it's actually very low profile. He gives hardly any interviews. But yeah, really popular because just, first class attitude always. And like I say, just super consistent. Seems a nice guy as well. I think he's actually quite religious, which is, you kind of see those kind of Brazilian player type celebrations sometimes when they score, going to their knees, hands to the air, quite kind of openly, I think, religious in that way. And I think there's even been one or two articles I've read about him, how religion is quite a big part of his life. So certainly not the sort of player who I think is going to be hitting the town and causing trouble, getting into fights in nightclubs or something like that. So you don't have to worry about anything like that. Yeah, you're getting really a player who's just quite calm, good professional, good trainer, won't rock the boat, will do a good job. And I wish him well. And yeah, that's interesting actually. Yeah, you said you picked up on the reaction of the Benfica fans. So they played their last game. He played his last game for Benfica yesterday. I know it's pretty much an open secret that he'd be leaving. And so at the end of the game, he went to the crowd, and it was at Alverca, which is a town just about 20 miles outside Lisbon. So, a lot of Benfica fans there. And yeah, they gave him a, really, really nice tribute. Just all the other players actually pushed him forward. It kind of shows you, how much his own teammates thought about him, wanted to kind of give him his moment. And yeah, so yeah, no problems at all in terms of attitude, getting a first class player.
Excellent. Yeah. And just curious before we let you go, Tom, because it's really summed things up nicely, but a Burnley player was at Benfica last year, yeah? Zeki Amdouni. I'm just curious if you got a chance to see much of him and what sort of impression he left. He's obviously picked up a bad injury since he's come back to Burnley, but I just wonder how he did overall there.
Yeah, it's quite good. Yeah, I saw him, so I live in Lisbon, so I go to see him. I'm actually a Sporting fan, so I see all the Sporting games. I've got a little question for you. You might guess what it is in a second. But I've got so I see all the Sporting, but I see most of the Benfica games as well, and all their big games. And yeah, he did okay. When he first came over, it looked like he might force his way into the team, kind of as a starter, because he came on a lot as a substitute and usually did well, scored quite a few goals. Thing is, it was really fierce competition for places. Di Maria was like an absolute staple. Angel Di Maria is still playing amazing football at his age, so he couldn't be dropped. And he just found it difficult to get in the team, Amdouni. But yeah, he did. He did okay. He looked good when he came on, but couldn't really get on a roll, I'd say, because he was just in and out of the team the whole time. I remember there was quite a lot of talk after he'd scored a few goals, his substitute cameo appearances, that Benfica, were quite interested in making the deal permanent. But then, he kind of never really, I suppose, did enough to I think it's quite a high transfer fee, and people fought for a player who's not 100% convinced, maybe not through his own fault, maybe he didn't really have enough opportunity, that seemed like it wasn't going to happen even before his injury. So yeah, he did okay though. He did okay, not bad at all. I don't know, is he back at Burnley now?
He is, yeah, but he picked up a bad injury. He's probably
Yeah.
out for. People think he might be out for all of the season, unfortunately.
Right.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. I was just sorry if I could just ask you a quick question. Also, like I said, I'm a sporting fan. So, Marcus Edwards, of course, he had an interesting time here at Sporting. Sometimes looked an absolute world beater. Sometimes looked like he just wasn't very interested in what was going on the pitch. Very up and down. But when he was good, oh boy, he was really good. I was just wondering how he's got on at Burnley.
Chris, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, sure. I think it's fair to say, from coming in January, he was sort of the catalyst for Burnley improving as becoming a more sort of cohesive attacking force. Their output in terms of goal scoring virtually doubled, and he was one of the main men behind that. Didn't sort of in terms of his stats, he didn't score too many goals, didn't create too many official assists, but he was sort of linking play up and just really good to watch. Really, as you'll know full well, he's a little magician, isn't he, with the ball at his
Yeah.
feet? But so it's been a huge disappointment for us all to see him. He seems to have sort of gone down. He was if he was fit, he started the second half of last season, but he seems to be sort of fourth, fifth in the pecking order come the promotion to the Premier League, and played against Derby in the League Cup last week and was really poor by his standards. And it's one of those that you sort of half of you wondered whether you might see him depart on loan today. Maybe he's that sort of out of the picture at the moment, but I really hope he forces his way back in, because he's that X factor player, isn't he?
Yeah. I think he needs a lot of confidence. He's a kind of confidence player, isn't he? He needs confidence. I think also he seems to be quite a quiet guy, kind of reserved, and I think maybe need to have a special coach or a special manager to really the right circumstances to bring the best out of him. But yeah, when he's good, I mean, there was a stage at Sporting about 2 years ago where he just went through just an absolute purple patch, and for 2 months he was brilliant. We played Champions League against Tottenham. I remember this game. Of course, Tottenham is former club. He just, like you say, sometimes he's a magician. He went on a run, which if he'd put it in a net, he literally took it past about 7 players. If he'd put it in a net, it would have been like, like a Maradona-like goal, but just got saved, and just kept it out. The keeper just kept it out. But yeah, then he kind of just fell. He was very inconsistent, isn't he? And then he kind of went through these patches where he was either really good or really badly. But anyway, hope he gets his form back and he makes a splash. Maybe Florentino will give him a little bit of a put his arm around his shoulder, and that Portuguese connection, that Lisbon connection, maybe get him firing.
Thank you very much, Tom, for joining us. We really appreciate your time, and I'm sure you've given Clarets fans something to really look forward to as Florentino Luis starts his Burnley career. But yeah, thank you very much, mate, and maybe we'll catch up with you a little bit later in the season for a bit of an update and see what the papers over there are making of the 2 former Lisbonites in East Lancashire as well.
Yeah, sure, for sure. But that's one thing, all Portuguese people, I love keeping track of their players, when they go abroad. So yeah, there'll be a lot of eyes on Florentino, and like I said, popular players. So yeah, hope he does well for you. Cheers.
Excellent.
Cheers, Tom.
Super. Cheers, Tom.
Good stuff. So there we go. A bit of an inside track on Florentino Luis. One of 10 permanent summer signings. We'll just run through them because I'd written it out on a big sheet of paper. So, of course, we had Jadon Anthony, Bashir Humphreys, the aforementioned Mr. Edwards, and Zian Fleming, which were loan deals which became permanent. And then the kind of new signings, if you will, Martin Dubravka, Breuer, Ugochukwu, Chowna, Hartmann, Brun Larsen re-signed, of course, Max Weiss, the young German keeper, Kyle Walker, Tuan Zebe, and then today's signing as well. We'll get on to what we think of that as a window in a second, but just for the admin side of things, a few departures today, much busier on the clearing out the locker rather than moving stuff into a new locker down at the Barnfield training ground, I'm sure. Michael Obafemi off to Bochum in the German second tier. Darko Cherlinov off to a Turkish club, which I'm not even going to pretend to pronounce. My Turkish isn't great. Ramsey off to Leicester City. That was announced just before we start recording. And we think, just because Sasha, and we know he's kind of quite close with Manuel Benson's entourage, he said his departure for Swansea City on loan was deal done. So we are still waiting for that to be confirmed as we're recording. But let's forget all about players who aren't going to be playing a part. And Simon, I think your relationship with the Burnley recruitment over the summer has gone from one side to the other. I think we all had doubts over, Chowner, for instance. We were kind of thinking, is he really going to make an impact? I think it's fair to say off the bench, albeit he has made a bit of an impact. But what do you think? What would your kind of report card say if I was going to try and get you to write a report card of the recruitment this summer?
Well, some of it's really good. I think, I think looks like we've signed a solid goalkeeper and made some money, a little bit of money. Kyle Walker, I think, is a signing we've talked about plenty on this podcast. An impressive signing. I think Hartmann, we'll see, but there's some promising signs from Hartmann so far. I think Chouani looks really interesting player. Excited to see more of him. Ugo Chukwu is, I think, looks like the best of the bunch so far. And then Florentino looks like, on paper and everything that we heard there from Tom, everything we've seen from Benfica fans, everything we've seen on highlight clips, and all the description of him as being that sort of destroyer midfielder, the number 6 who protects the back line, wins the ball, gets things moving, lays it off to Cullen or Ogochukwu and gets us playing. Sounds absolutely what we need. And he's a Champions League level player who's coming in. So, that's a fantastic signing. He's got to that age, 26, where probably a player like that is not going to get signed by your Arsenals or your Liverpools, because he's just a little bit. If he's 23, 24, they go for it. 26, 27, they don't. So I think that looks on paper like a fantastic signing. Disappointed we haven't brought in a quality central defender to replace CJ Egan-Riley, because I don't think we can consider at this stage, unless we get proven massively wrong, Tuanzebe to be, a solid replacement at the moment, because he's come in with a massive injury track record, and he's been injured pretty much all the time he's been here. So, I really hope he turns that around and he proves himself to be fit and everything, but at the moment there's a big question mark over him. And I think we are short of a really good, solid partner for Maxime Esteve there. We'll see how that plays out. Some people today saying on social media, well, maybe Bashir Humphries turns out to be that person. Let's see. And then up front, we've signed, we haven't signed Josh Sargent. We haven't gone out and signed a real proven goal scorer, although it's a different level of football, the Championship, but we've gone there before and it's worked. And Breuer is a gamble signing. He's scored, I think, 3 goals since 2022. 3 goals since 2022. Yeah. And that's our big centre forward to keep us in the Premier League. On the other hand, Foster's looked bright in some games and looks like he might be able to fight to keep his place. And we don't know what Fleming's going to be like in the Premier League. So it's a mixed bag for me. I would have been a lot happier with a centre-half and a centre-forward as well coming in. I'd have been a lot happier if we'd have signed someone like Josh Sargent and if we'd have signed a big, strong, physical centre-half. But we haven't. And you've got to say Florentino Luis is an absolute cracking sign. And that midfield looks like it could be the best Premier League midfield we've ever had.
Mm. And Chris, I mean, we talk a lot about kind of keeping goals out and scoring goals. But our biggest complaint often in the Premier League has been that our midfield can't compete, hasn't it? Do you think the signing of Ugachukwu and Florentino Luis addresses that issue? I mean, I'll ask you in a second about at the back and up front, but as Simon just said there, this is probably the best central midfield that Burnley have had in the top flight, isn't it?
Well, we've never had that sort of very, very modern midfielder, the sort of, the powerhouse, rangy, bit of a, bit of pace about him sort of thing. But, the type that's not going to get physically overrun at this level. We've had very good footballers, good competitors, people who can keep the ball. I mean, you look at your Defours and Corks and people like that. But you want partnerships, don't you? We've spoken about partnerships across the place, and Marnie and Jones were a fantastic partnership, but weren't quite good enough at this level. But Defoe wasn't fit enough. We only really saw half a season of Stephen Defoe, and I think that half a season were enough for many of us to say he's arguably the best Burnley player we've seen in our lifetimes. To be fair, but they look. I say if Luis can sit there and let Cullen and Big Leslie go about their business, then we talk about conceding goals, and you want that insurance, don't you? That it sounds like Luis isn't going to go wandering too high up the pitch and getting nosebleeds. He's going to try and keep that back door locked. And it might, depending on the system that Scott Parker plays, it might let your Hartmans and your Walkers get higher up the pitch and have a bit more impact in the final third than we've seen so far.
Yeah, and Simon, interestingly, Florentino taking the number 16 shirt previously worn by a certain Mr. Defoe. Just to kind of look at that creativity. I mean, we often, Tom asked us there about Marcus Edwards, and we often talked about how Marcus Edwards' presence on the field unlocked Jadon Anthony. Does having a really solid midfield does that allow perhaps the more creative players not to abandon some of that defensive duty, but they don't have to worry about it? We struggled quite a few times to kind of get a position where we felt comfortable and have allowed us forward players to be as creative as they can be. Do you think sorting the midfield out, Scott Parker's hoping that then unlocks something further forward? Hence the reason there's not been perhaps this mad push for somebody to challenge Breuer or Foster up top.
I think it's probably just money, isn't it? I think if Scott Parker would have, I'm sure he'd say now, if they said to him, would you like to spend 20 million on a Championship striker who's scored 15 goals last season and has got 6 in 5 so far this season, he'd probably say yes, wouldn't he? But I think it's probably a money thing. But I do think you're making a good point there, which is that having that solid foundation in midfield, it changes a lot of things, doesn't it? Because if Florentino is as good as he looks at winning back the ball, getting possession, and then playing that simple pass, and then we've got players like Cullen and Ugachukwu around him who are not going to give the ball away easily, it gives us a breather and it gives us a chance in games, doesn't it? Because how many times in Premier League games over the years have we been against the big boys away and it's just relentless, isn't it? It's just, I mean, it's going to be like that against certain teams anyway. There's not, it was like that for Arsenal at Liverpool on Sunday, wasn't it? There's going to be some games. But just those, games against the Palaces, those sort of teams where you're wanting to get a foothold in a game and just have a breather, give the back four a little bit of a break. And you don't want your wide players, to your point, Greavesy, you don't want them having to be second fullbacks all the time. And we saw that a lot in the past in the Premier League where, players like poor George Boyd, who came to us as a flair number 10 and who was playing out wide as a winger in the Championship at times and stuff like that. And he ends up just shuttling like a wing back in front of a fullback. You don't want that from Jadon Anthony this year, do you? And if Florentino's going to be the guy who can just go across and just eliminate that threat and take care of it and get it moving, and then we keep the ball, then hopefully Jadon Anthony on the left, and I think it'll end up being Chouamani on the right, can look forward rather than always be looking back.
Yeah. And Chris, I mean, again, looking at the last Premier League season and the recruitment, we've said a few times over the last 12 months that it feels like ALK as an ownership group have matured. I think the project, and we all hate the P word, has matured. The profile of what we brought in is different to the company season, isn't it? I mean, it's the same recruitment team, but it's a different profile of player. Do you think there's a not an abandonment of the system of, get young, unknown players, develop them and sell them? And I know you've got I know you'd favour a development kind of plan. Do you think there's a maturing in our business? And do you think that's down to Scott Parker? Do you think that's down to ALK perhaps giving a bit more control to the recruitment team? What do you put down to this seemingly maturity, this seeming new maturity when it comes to who we sign and the purpose of these signings, shall we say?
It's the experience, isn't it? 2 years ago, you go back to the documentary and Matt Williams talking about the spine of the team and leaders and having that Premier League know-how and knowledge, and we just didn't have that 2 years ago. He brought on top of the 4 lads who were on loan last year that made their loans permanent. We've added another 10, but it doesn't feel like we've still got the core of the group that was promoted, even without the lads who, the loan signings, completed permanent moves. You still got Steve in there, and you still got Cullen in there, and players who've been with us for a period now, who know what it's all about. But I mean, they did make, you look at, I mean, Berger was an international footballer, a Premier League footballer, who they paid a few quid for and made a good profit. I mean, that was as good a bit of business as they did 2 years ago. But largely, it was untried, very young lads that they were trying to turn a quick profit on. And I mean, see it to an extent with the Odeberts of this world and Trafford, it's worked. But we needed a bit more nous, a bit more streetwise nature from these players, and to give the lads that got us up a chance. You see, like the Antonys 2 years ago, his equivalent is a Rory or a Benson who never got sight and sound of the Premier League. And Anthony's come up, and he's 2 in 2. And, he's made a silly mistake at the end of the game Saturday, but he looks to be thriving at this level. But the other lads never got the opportunity. So it's for that dressing room. You need them to be like together and fighting everyone's corner. And in fact, you just got the sense it wasn't quite that way 2 years ago, because if someone's come in over the top of me and I've not had a shot in the Premier League, well, you'd be furious, wouldn't you?
Simon, I mean, let's get down to kind of brass tacks. I think again we've often argued this point. Are we stronger at the end of the window than we were at the start of the window, having lost, let's say, James Trafford at the start of the window, but having lost Trafford, CJ Egan-Riley, who was sent off for Marseille at the weekend, Josh Brownhill, who's still not got a club, and we'll perhaps just touch on Josh right at the end. Are we stronger now than we were going into this recruitment campaign?
Yeah, I think we are. Yeah, I think the big area where we're not is central defence.
I think that's agreed.
Which is unfortunate. But I think everywhere else we are. I mean, we should be. We spent 40-odd million for the centre of midfield, so that should be stronger. Yeah. I think we've got good options out wide. Up front, are we stronger? Breuer's come in. He's another player we didn't have last year. We still got what we had last year. Fleming and Foster. So, I think you could say we're stronger there. The jury's out on whether the Breuer's a good signing or not. We'll see. But I think overall, yes, we are at fullback. We look stronger. I think Hartman and Kyle Walker is an upgrade at fullback. And it's just unfortunate we didn't really replace CJ Egan Riley.
Yeah. And Chris, I mean, Simon made this point, I think, on the Sunday debrief when we kind of touched on what we'd be looking at. Is there a sense as well that the ponds or the pools in which we're shopping in and kind of casting a net in now is getting to the point where these are the kind of players you need to be going for? I mean, you just mentioned there 40 million quid on a midfield, but, you look at the fact that we've signed a fullback from Feyenoord, we've signed a midfielder and a striker from Chelsea, we've signed a Champions League level midfielder from Benfica. It doesn't feel like we're, I don't know, fishing in the pond where you're kind of just happy to get anybody who's perhaps pulled on a shirt of a top six side somewhere. We're buying players which are linked elsewhere, and you don't know how much these links are, but I think Florentino was linked with Everton, linked with Roma, linked with Marseille, but has come to Burnley. Marcus Edwards, we know this January was destined to go elsewhere, but we were able to snatch him. Is there a sense that the places we're shopping is an upgrade and that by nature brings you better players?
The nature of the Premier League, you are shopping in better better markets, aren't you? We're in an era where they were the same red and black stripes, but our Bournemouth beating Milan to players left, right, and centre. It just you look at the the TV money that Serie A had 30 years ago, and the all-conquering Milan team. It's unthinkable. You've got Brentford spending 40 million on a player here, and like I say, Brighton have had a history of sort of the last 10 years of spending significant sums. I mean, and the sales, the development and sales, selling players for like 100 million plus. It's staggering, isn't it? We're in a situation now where if you're in the top 20 teams in England, i.e., in the Premier League, your wealth, you are one of. I think I was listening to Rory Smith say the other day on the Five Live. You're one of the top richest 30 clubs in Europe. So that's where you're shopping. In the past, the purse strings have been tied, with one thing and another. A belief that Sean Dyche could continue to pull rabbits out of hats, or holding on to the money to fatten the club up for a sale, etc. Whichever way you want to look at it. But we're not in that situation now. We're looking wider. We've got the data, the metrics. We're prepared to take a punt on players. And you're in those markets. Like I said, Benfica couldn't afford a punt at Amdouni. It probably would have cost similar to what we spent 12 months prior. And he'd had a solid enough season for him. Scoring goals, Champions League level, etc. This is where we are. I mean, Sunderland. I mean, that team that won the playoff final at Wembley cost 4 million quid, I believe. And you get up. And if you've got an owner that's prepared to put his hand in his pocket, and they found another load of change down the back of the sofa today, and they've had a right go. And to me, I look at Sunderland and I think you have to stay up now. You have to stay up, considering what your Wolves have spent and clubs like that.
Yeah, definitely. Let's have a look very briefly at some of those outgoings. Simon, there's no real surprises. They're Obafemi, Cherlinoff, Ramsey, potentially Benson. We think Trezor and Delquan might get moves. There are still a couple of markets open, the Turkish market and the Middle Eastern markets. I think the Saudi market certainly open until the 11th and 12th of September. There's no real surprise there, is there?
Chorley market's open tomorrow.
The Flatiron market's open tomorrow for books and meat and everything else you can get. We're not shopping there anymore, Chris. We've moved on. We're in booths at the, to use the analogy. Are you slightly surprised by Ramsey's move to Leicester? But aside from that, they all looked pretty much on the cards, didn't they, from the off?
Well, there's still a few left there, aren't there? There's still, unless, they are all heading to Saudi, which I'd be surprised at. But we're going to end up with a few of them still stuck there, aren't we? Delquois still there, isn't he?
Yep, Delquois.
Delquois still there. Trezor, let's not even open that Pandora's box of topics and discussions there. But, I mean, so they're still there. I was a bit surprised about Ramsey, though. I mean, no one was talking about loaning Ramsey out. Let's be honest about that. At the weekend, if somebody had said, I think we'll loan Ramsey out, the discussion on this podcast last week was that he'd played so well against Derby County, he'd put 100% effort in, and Daz was saying he'd put himself in the frame for, being part of the squad at United.
Yeah. Been on the bench, I think, for the last three games.
I'm surprised at that one. I'm surprised. And, people are going to say, oh, well, it's to get him games. It is, but he's put the effort in to get him fit and get back in the Burnley setup in the Premier League, and he's been loaned to Leicester City. I don't think that's a good sign. So, I'm a bit disappointed, and it does reduce our options there, really. When we talk about alternatives to Hannibal, if we're playing that system where we're not going to go with out-and-out wingers on both sides, a Chouani type player, or somebody's injured or whatever, what have we got as backup then to our... If we're talking about those three midfielders we've talked about, Ugochukwu, Cullen and Florentino being the three, well, backup's Josh Laurent. And Ramsey's playing for Leicester City.
Yeah. Chris, I'm going to ask you just a cheeky question.
It's like I said to you. Before you do, I just like to say, if he gets games for Leicester City, who've started the Championship season ever so well, if he gets games for Leicester and Leicester have a good season and Burnley get relegated and Leicester get promoted, we'll never see him again in a Burnley shirt. Leicester will probably end up, we'll have a bit of that. We'll take him off your hands, sort of thing. And if he's had a good year at Leicester, he'll be inclined to stay there. I'd imagine.
He's a Midlands lad as well, isn't he?
So I don't mind him going out, but you want him to go out to the club that's probably not going to usurp us potentially in 12 months' time.
Definitely. I was going to ask you a cheeky question just because I get asked about Trezor every time. Does the spot on the bench for the last couple of matches that was taken by Ramsey then allow for the Tresurrection that we've been waiting for?
Tresurrection. History would suggest no. Whenever he's had these cameos in the cup, he's been nowhere near the squad in the subsequent games, has he? He's not involved. He wasn't involved at United at the weekend. He's not been involved in the league whatsoever. He didn't play a minute of league football last season. And I think you're just looking at that Turkish window or whenever.
Yeah.
That
looks the obvious one.
Another 2 weeks for Turkey or something like that.
I think it's the 11th of September for Turkey, 12th of September for the Saudi League.
If he goes to one of these lesser lights.
Yeah. Definitely. Let's wrap up. Just wanted to do a little bit.
One of the bigots, is he?
No, probably not. Just wanted to do a bit of admin on former players. There's been a few former players moving today as well. Charlie Taylor's joined West Bromwich Albion. Ben Mears joined Sheffield United. Jeremy Sarmiento's joined Cremonese to play alongside Jamie Vardy, we believe. And Maxwell Cornet rejoining Genoa, having spent time on loan there last season. I'm sure by the time this comes out, there'll be, other deals across the Premier League still being announced. Heck, we might even have a couple more outgoings that have been kind of kept under wraps. We were certainly expecting Manuel Benson to join Swansea, but we'll probably pick through a bit more of this in our next podcast. Obviously, we've got the international break coming up, but we will be back on YouTube and on your usual platforms over the next week or so whilst the various lads are away with their international teams. But until then, enjoy the week and up the Clarets.